What is up, Soul Fam? It's Sundal from Substance Over Style. And welcome to a new video. So kind of balls that one up. So I'm coming at you today from Bristol. I'm staying here in my hotel room. I've got a shoot tomorrow, so yes, we are coming at you live from Bristol. And I want to talk to you today. Hang on, I just want to check the lighting on my face. Sorry, this is like a new camera, so I'm just kind of figuring out how it works and if it's going to autofocus. I mean, it was doing something weird during my thrift store, my eBay haul, so I don't know how it's going to work, but yeah, like, just bear with me while I kind of figure out the settings and stuff. It might take a few videos before it actually starts looking good, but yeah, anyway, as I was saying, so I want to talk today, I've had like a lot of people request quite a few different topics, and this topic, talking about sort of models in the industry and sort of very narrow sort of beauty standards, has been on my list to talk about for a really long time, and now I was kind of nervous to talk about it before because I didn't want to call it, because, you know, even I sometimes get a bit, you know, nervous to speak the truth, but what is plainly obvious. But with recent kind of things happening in the news, you know, certain people being arrested for certain misdemeanors, I feel somewhat justified and vindicated in talking about this. So I want to kind of broach the topic of why models are generally so skinny. And, you know, this is a conversation that is had every season, every time there's a fashion week. All the newspapers are talking about why are models so thin. And I remember when I first started modelling, there were 2 Brazilian models that died of anorexia. I can't remember their names, I'll have to look up their names and add them. But I remember it was huge in the news, and it was just like, yes, we need to have a, you know, international conversation about this, because, you know, it's not just terrible for the models, but it's also affecting, you know, women's mental health and physical health. You know, anorexia is rife. We've got girls, you know, in eating disorder clinics or self-harming because they don't fit these ridiculously anorexic standards of beauty that the fashion industry keeps on promoting. But yet nothing has really changed. Nothing's really changed. Like, yes, okay, now we have like a plus size division, and we never really had that. But in terms of straight size models and the models that are on the runway, we're only really recently starting to see a little bit of change, partly due to Me Too, and partly due to, I would say mainly due to social media, and, you know, a lot of the conversations that have been had in like intersectional feminist spaces. So, you know, I do want to give like intersectional feminists their due for kind of promoting change on that front, but I just think that like not enough people have been naming the elephant in the room, which is, you know, a lot of the time apologists for the fashion industry will say that the reason why models are so skinny and why designers promote such a skinny aesthetic is because they're young. So, you know, models are young, so they're naturally skinny. Nobody thought to ask the question, well, why are models so young? Why? You know, why is it that you're promoting luxury, high fashion, which is usually targeted at an over 30 demographic of women, on teenagers? You know, why is that? They're actual children. Like, why have we never questioned that? Another thing that people say, the reason why models are so skinny is because it looks better, because the clothes just hang better on, you know, a rail-like physique. But you know, I'm going to dispute that that's the reason why, because models haven't always been quite so anorexic as they are now, or how they have been kind of post sort of like heroin chic, the Kate Moss era. And it got even worse after Kate Moss, because Kate Moss was shockingly thin. In the 80s, you know, supermodels had a lot of personality. They were very voluptuous. They were very athletic. And then Kate Moss came in and kind of shocked the fashion industry and took them by storm with this very young, very, you know, fresh, youthful, and extremely skinny look. But now, like, Kate Moss is 5'7" on a good day. So, you know, the fact that we've got so many models, like most runway models are 5'9" and over. You know, even 5'9" is considered short for luxury high fashion. They're usually 5'10" or 5'11", and they're still expected to be even skinnier than Kate Moss. Like, you know, Kate Moss, I think, was like, and I know because I used to, when I first started modeling, I used to go and, like, you know, examine all the boards. Kate Moss was like a 35 on the hips. I mean, maybe when she was really young, she might have been smaller than that. But a lot of these models are 5'11" and a 35 max on the hips. Some of them even 34 on the hips. And it's, you know, agencies can't act like the models are naturally thin because they're young, because that just isn't true. Like, they do ask models to lose weight. I know, because I've been in the industry for 15 years, and I've seen models go to drastic measures to get down to the measurements that they need to be for certain markets. And for Fashion Week, I've seen models nearly die of anorexia. I've seen models that have actually been staying in an anorexia clinic and still been going to castings and still booking work. So that's kind of the state of things. And we have to ask the question, why does the industry like models who look anorexic, when that wasn't always the case? It was, you know, in the 80s it wasn't that way. So I watched another video, which I will link, that talked about how it's basically the pret-a-porter industry, which, you know, it's easier for pret-a-porter and cheaper to make clothes that have minimal darts. Because, you know, if a body doesn't have curvature, then you have to do less cutting and, you know, less wastage when you do the darts. And that's feasible, but at the same time, it wouldn't be possible to kind of get so many models to lose weight if there weren't a wider context of just financial abuse and coercion going on. You can't coerce people into becoming a very, very unhealthy weight to the point where they lose their period, you know, their health starts to suffer. Like, they're not eating, basically, affects their mental health, all of that stuff, without some form of coercive control. And the fact that models are really, really young is a problem. And the reason why they are so young is because, I mean, I think the main reason is because they're much easier. You know, a 16-year-old is much easier to control and get them to do what you want them to do than a 25-year-old. And I know this because I do model scouting, and when I work with models who are a little bit older, it's even hard to, like, I've never asked any of my models, you know, to go to drastic measures to lose weight. I've told them what the industry requirements are, but some of my models are curvy and commercial, and, you know, they're fine the way they are, because I have a lot of agencies that want commercial models, and that's the type of space that I work in. Like, most of my models are not like luxury high fashion, because, to be honest, there isn't that much money in it. But at the same time, you know, a younger model who's really desperate to be successful in the industry, because this is like her ticket to fame and fortune, is much easier to control. And the only way that you're able to do that is by getting a model who's not just young, but also from some kind of economically disempowered background. So I'm going to post a link in the description box to a talk by James Scully that he gave at Business of Fashion Voices, where he talked about not just the coercive control in terms of like weight and measurements, but also the financial exploitation, all different kinds of harassment, everything from sexual harassment to just downright bullying and racism, and just all the problems that he's seen in the industry. Because when I started in this industry, like the industry now compared to how it was when I started 15 years ago is completely like two worlds apart. And I think that, you know, Me Too has had a massive impact. Social media has had a massive impact. The whole intersectional feminist movement and, you know, women now having a voice and starting to speak up about these issues has had a really huge impact. And I want to do a separate video where I talk about Me Too and the sacred feminine awakening that we're seeing, which is basically, you know, the primary sacred feminine principle is that of care and compassion, and we're now starting to see that awaken in so many people. You know, it doesn't matter what your biological sex is, we're seeing the sacred feminine awakening in so many people now. People are actually starting to care, they're starting to understand the objective difference between wrong and right, and it doesn't matter whether something looks good or is cheaper if it's wrong, like morally wrong. Because, you know, he talks about where it started, this whole idea where the change happened from the supermodels in the 1980s, where they all were diverse, they had diverse looks, diverse personalities, they were athletic, they were voluptuous, and then, you know, went to this there was no diversity. It was all these Eastern European girls who were economically disadvantaged, super young, so this like Lolita-esque look that was pioneered by Prada. Now, I don't want to confuse cause and effect, but seeing all this stuff in the media with Jeffrey Epstein now being accused of raping children, you know, teenage girls, taking them to his island, being buddy-buddy with the likes of Trump, the Clintons, and God knows who else. Like, we've seen, like, you know, people have been lifting the lid on these elite paedophile rings. I've been researching this for a long time, so I already know this wasn't news to me. But, you know, we're now kind of seeing a lot of that happening. And when you've got sort of luxury high fashion who are kind of moving in, you know, very elite circles, promoting an aesthetic that is like very infantilized vision of what women should look like. I mean, if we look at the way our society is anyway and our perceptions of female beauty, it is extremely thin, like prepubescently thin, extremely young, like we're not allowed to age. And this starts in the industry that I work in, and I know because, you know, a lot of agencies will not take models who are over a certain age unless they're extremely experienced. But even if they're extremely experienced, there's kind of like, you know, everybody knows that there's like an age limit to modeling, you know, and that's totally ridiculous. And the thing is, it's not so much with it's not so much, you don't see it so much with male models. Male models are allowed to age, and as they get older, they actually come into alignment with more sort of, you know, luxury, like, you know, luxury brands. Like, you know, you get the alcohol advertising, you've got cigarettes, you've got sports cars, you've got aftershave, you know, you've got, you know, men's luxury fashion. Like, some of them will use young teenage boys, but there's a lot in the there's a lot of brands that also prefer an older sort of male model look. But you don't see that so much in women's fashion. In women's fashion, it's like you have to look super young, super fresh, wrinkle free, look like a teenage girl, look like a teenage boy, in fact, because, you know, this is again suppression of the feminine. We don't want to see any curves. We want you to look quite androgynous. I mean, now with Instagram, we're starting to see it change a little bit, because now we're starting to see, you know, more curves. But again, it's completely sexually objectified. So, and I do think that pornography has had a massive influence, because there's a lot of overlap between modeling, Instagram, and pornography. So that's kind of a problem. And when you look at like all this stuff with, you know, these elite paedophile rings, I think that there's a massive overlap there. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily intentional that they're trying to promote a paedophile aesthetic, you know, to try and poison human sexuality to the point where, you know, men generally prefer young, underage, teenage girls to adult grown women, but we can kind of see the effects of it, you know, like for anybody who's been involved in any keyboard wars. I mean, I haven't personally, because these days I kind of stay away from that because I don't want to give it my emotional energy. But I've seen people on my Facebook posting screenshots of conversations that they've been having about the Jeffrey Epstein case. And there have been so many men, and these are normal men. These are not like, you know, elite politicians or high profile people or, you know, in Hollywood or whatever. These are just your average person who want to really make a very distinct delineation between actual children and teenage girls. Why? I think we know why. We know why, don't we? So we're seeing the whether that was their. I'm not saying that it was necessarily that they're trying to socially engineer human consciousness, but that's the result. You know, that's what we're seeing now. I'm going to put another link in the description box below, and I'm really surprised that I haven't seen. You know, if you type in paedophile culture, this is the only article that comes up. It's weird because if you type in rape culture, you will get thousands and thousands of articles from so many different blogs, people talking about rape culture on all sides. But this was the only article that I found on paedophile culture that talked about how the fashion industry and the mainstream media is promoting the infantilization of women, the suppression of femininity, and just, you know, this whole like, yeah, just making, you know, just encouraging women to look like, well, not even 15-year-old girls, like, because I know when I was 15, I had curves and I looked like a woman, like almost, like to look like 11, 12-year-old girls, like it's problematic, it's super problematic, and I just want to call it, like I want to call it what it is. And you know, I've been in this industry for a really long time, and it's one of the things that just really fucks me off. So yeah, that's that. It's nearly midnight, so I don't want to rant about this all night, and I think I've probably talked for 13 minutes. I mean, I don't really have much more to say. Like, what do you think? Like, share your views in the comment box below. Do you think I'm confusing cause and effect? Do you think it's intentional, or do you think it's just accidental? Like, you know, share your views. Let's have a conversation about this, because I really want to rip the plaster off this whole thing, and I'm just like, nothing makes me more mad. So yeah, anyway, I'm gonna go to sleep. I will love you and leave you, soul fam. Peace out.
You're introduced to LSD, and unless you've taken some other drug, like for instance like marijuana or something, well, you know, it's an altogether new thing, and you actually can have a religious experience